Chicken prices remain high in Sarawak. Abang Johari and AIRBUS discusses alternative fuel, and Italy faces worst drought in 70 years. Those are the headlines for tonight. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Muhammad Yusuf, and you're now watching TVS Nightline. We begin with our top story. Consumer demand for poultry has continued to rise nationwide despite higher prices. The latest retail price has been capped between 9 ringgit and 80 cents and 12 ringgit and 90 cents per kilogram, depending on the districts in Sarawak, effective July 1st to August 31st, hitting record high level in terms of pricing. With prices foreseen to increase, consumers are not showing sign to trade down when deciding on their protein.
Limbang and lawas will pay the most at 12 ringgit 90 cent per kilogram for the birds. According to the Ministry of Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs (KPD and HEP), Kapit, Bukit Mabong, Song and Belaga at 11 ringgit 40 cent, whereas Sriawan, Seratok, Betong and Lubu Antu, the price are set at 10 ringgit 50 cent per kilogram, while the standard chicken are capped at 9 ringgit and 80 cent for most areas. Meanwhile, the maximum price of Grade A chicken eggs is set at 47 cent each in most districts, Grade B eggs at 45 cent each, and Grade C eggs at 43 cent each. For super chicken, retail prices in Sarawak are in the range of 10 ringgit and 80 cent to 13 ringgit 90 cent per kilogram, while live chickens ranging between 6 ringgit and 80 cent and 8 ringgit 60 cent per kilogram. Earlier, Agriculture and Food Industries Minister Dato Sri Dr. Ronald Kiandi said that the government had allocated a subsidy of 369.5 million ringgit for chicken and chicken eggs, bringing the total amount spent on subsidies to 1.1 billion ringgit since February 5th. He said the increase in prices of goods is an issue that is not just happening in Malaysia, but is a global phenomenon due to the supply chain disruption triggered by geopolitical conflict and climate change.
Premier of Sarawak, Datuk Patinggi Tan Sri Abang Johari Tun Openg on Wednesday received a courtesy call from AIRBUS Malaysia and SEDC Energy. Among others, the visit serves to discuss the production of sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF, as an alternative aviation fuel.
According to Sarawak Economic Development Corporation SEDC Chairman Tan Sri Dato Amar Abdul Aziz Hussein, the project is currently in the final phase of research.
Oleh kerana Premier Sarawak sedang juga merancang untuk mengeluarkan sustainable aviation fuel yang dapat digunakan oleh pihak AIRBUS. Jadi ada macam satu jalinan bersama yang kita akan dapat buat di masa hadapan antara Sarawak menerusi SEDC Energy bersama dengan pihak AIRBUS dan juga EMIC. Projek ini kita nak mula sekarang dalam study stage, feasibility study, dan kalau dia berjaya mungkin dalam tahun hadapan kita akan dapat mulakan, kerana kerajaan telah juga memperuntukkan seluas 10,000 ekar untuk projek ini di Bintulu. Ya. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Earlier this month, Abang Johari announced plans to embark on the production of biofuels for aviation.
Now, Italy is facing its worst drought in 70 years. The situation has not only affected the livelihood of farmers, but has greatly impacted agricultural activities conducted at the surrounding area of the Po River, as salty seawater has started to replace fresh water. The 30,000 square kilometer area surrounding Po River is where more than a third of Italy's agricultural production takes place, and the salination of the fresh water could risk burning the crops.
Praticamente non piovendo la portata del fiume Po si è abbassata notevolmente e quindi non è sufficiente per contrastare la risalita dell'acqua di mare dentro il fiume. E questo comporta appunto che nei nostri fossi abbiamo l'acqua di mare, quindi acqua salata e non idonea.
Europe's Copernicus Earth observation reported the saltwater intrusion is already at a severe level, and it predicts low water level to persist during summer. The anti-salt barriers installed about 4 kilometers from where the Po River meets the sea are barely functioning due to low water levels. Crops will all be lost, according to the director of an agricultural consortium.
Se non piove nei prossimi 10-15 giorni il raccolto che non è ancora stato perso sarà perso e in questa fase il raccolto si sta perdendo progressivamente. Più dura la situazione, più grave diventa e più le superfici seminate non riescono a produrre. Poi vi renderete conto di quello che succede quando l'acqua salata va ad insalare la falda. Ci sono dei campi dove vedete che fino a un certo punto non si raccoglie niente, oltre c'è la coltura. Il problema è che se questa cosa aumenta di dimensioni è una cosa progressiva, più dura.
The estimated loss to incur on farmers will be more than 60% of their annual budget. The drought will affect the supply of goods Italy mainly produces, including tomatoes, wheat, hazelnuts, apples, fennels, and more. And now, Sarawak aspires to be a thriving society by 2030 by focusing on 6 economic sectors, where everyone enjoys economic prosperity, social inclusiveness, and a sustainable environment driven by data and innovation.
Deputy Premier Dato' Amar Awang Tengah Ali Ahsan said the 6 economic sectors are the manufacturing, commercial agriculture, tourism, forestry, mining and services. This was conveyed by Awang Tengah to Western Australia's Minister for Finance, Aboriginal Affairs, Racing and Gaming, Citizenship and Multicultural Interests, Dr. Tony Buti, during a courtesy call on the latter in Perth on Wednesday. Adding further, he said that more opportunities could be charted between Sarawak and Australia in view that both are rich in natural resources. Among those in the Sarawak delegation accompanying Awang Tengah were International Trade and Investment Deputy Minister Dato' Malcolm Musen Lamoh, Economic Planning Unit Director Dato' Abdullah Zaidel, and International Trade and Investment Ministry Acting Permanent Secretary Zulkarnain Masron.
Sarawak has been listed as one of the top 5 preferred destinations for domestic tourists for the year 2021. A recent report released by the Department of Statistics Malaysia, or DOSM, revealed that Sarawak has received a total of 6.5 million tourists in 2021, placing it the 3rd behind Selangor and Kuala Lumpur.
According to the report, Selangor received a total of 10.2 million domestic tourists and the Federal Territory of Kuala Lumpur with 9.1 million domestic tourists. The report also stated that the 3 top components of spending for domestic tourists is shopping with 50.3%, followed by food and beverage with 15.1% and purchase of vehicle fuel, which was recorded at 11.1%. Minister of Tourism, Creative Industries and Performing Arts, Datuk Seri Abdul Karim Rahman Hamzah said Sarawak has been proven to be the preferred tourism destination due to its diversity in food, culture and tradition.
The other thing which we are blessed, we have got so many different ethnicity, so many different racial group. When you have got many different racial groups, sampai 27, 28, we've got the Iban, the Bidayu, the Melanau, the Malays, the Chinese. Each and every one of them have got their own cara tarian, cara hidup, cara masakan, and this become good tourism product.
Commenting further on the data released by DOSM, he said this highlights Sarawak ecotourism.
People now, when they go traveling, it's not really for marketing, for shopping, you know. If you want to go shopping, you go to Singapore or Kuala Lumpur, but they just want to feel nature. They just want to see how people live, and then they appreciate the jungle, they appreciate the beaches, they appreciate nature, and we have got all that.
KARIM said this is further strengthened by the recognition obtained by Sarawak through UNESCO, where Kuching has been labelled as the city of gastronomy. Previously, he announced that his ministry has set a target of 1.2 million tourists for the year 2021, which has been achieved.
Now, a study will be conducted on the proposal of adding Chinese narratives on artifacts displayed in Borneo Cultural Museum, BCM. The study will revolve around tourist arrivals from China and how many costs it would incur to add the proposed narratives.
China is still closed now. If it can bring in a lot of tourists, if China tourists comes in big numbers, and the feeling is for it to be done as soon as possible, then we'll do it. But in the meantime, we'll make a study first. Okay? But that is a good proposal.
The minister spoke during a press conference held at Waterfront on Tuesday, June 29, at Waterfront Hotel. KARIM stated that BCM has received at least 300,000 visitors since it was opened to the public in March of this year. He also mentioned a location in Bau where many Chinese tourists would flock for its historical value.
There also is another avenue in Bau, Liu Sanbang, the cave where there seems to be a pilgrimage of a lot of Chinese tourists to that place. We would want it to be developed also, and probably come up with all those storylines which could attract more Chinese tourists.
According to history, Liu Shanbang is a prominent figure in Sarawak, widely known as the sole Chinese Raja of Sarawak in 1857. The gold miner managed to raise an army of 600 men as an uprising against the British, and his group was known as Kongsi. Chinese tourists mostly gather at an area called Mao San, located at the foot of a mountainous area where a tremendous amount of gold was mined.
Coming up right after the break, remains of COVID-19 can now be bathed and shrouded, and PETRONAS partners MITSUI in carbon capture and storage solutions, right here on TVS Nightline. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now, the remains of Muslims who died of COVID-19 infection can now be bathed and shrouded with the adoption of precautionary measures following the revised procedures made by the Ministry of Health. Prior to the announcement, only the tayammum method was used to handle the remains and was only managed by hospital staff without the involvement of any of the deceased family members. The bathing and shrouding will be conducted by a trained mortuary operator at the hospital while donning the personal protective equipment PPE, who must avoid any aerosol-generating procedures AGP, while only 2 family members who are fully vaccinated are allowed to help with the bathing and shrouding. Both of the next of kin will be provided with PPE. Meanwhile, for the management of non-Muslim bodies of COVID-19 patients, if the last rite procedure requires a change of new clothes, the clothes could be placed on the body without the AGP procedure. Similarly, only 2 fully vaccinated next of kin are allowed to participate. Additionally, KARI said only 1 body bag will be used for each body as compared to 2 body bags for 1 body previously. He also said that no maximum number is set for the number of family members involved in any funeral ceremony, but they must be wearing the PPE. Petroleum Nasional Berhad, or PETRONAS, has signed a Memorandum of Understanding with MITSUI and Co. Limited for the conceptual and feasibility studies on carbon capture and storage, or CCS, value chain, including the evaluation of carbon dioxide CO2 storage sites in Malaysia. Under the MOU, both parties will evaluate potential CO2 storage sites offshore Peninsula Malaysia, in line with PETRONAS's aim to establish Malaysia as a CCS regional hub in Asia Pacific.
Signed in a virtual ceremony on June 13, the scope of collaboration covers the evaluation of other CCS value chain, capturing and gathering strategy of CO2 from various industries, competitive transportation of the CO2, and emerging technology in direct air capture. Through the collaboration, PETRONAS will leverage on MITSUI & Co.'s experience in its CCS project in the United Kingdom, which is the first CO2 appraisal and storage license issued by the United Kingdom's Oil and Gas Authority. This collaboration is part of PETRONAS' deliberate steps to build a sustainable portfolio to support the transition toward climate change and subsequently participate in lower carbon energy play through collaborative efforts with industry partners.
Now, domestic tourism spending in 2021 dropped by 54.5% to register 18.4 billion ringgit compared to 40.4 billion ringgit in 2020, according to the Domestic Tourism Survey 2021 released by the Department of Statistics Malaysia DOSM on Wednesday.
Chief Statistician Datuk Sri Dr. Muhammad Uzir Mahidin said the number of domestic visitor arrivals in 2021 fell 49.9% to 66 million visitors as compared to 131.7 million visitors in the previous year and decreased by 72.4% when compared to the pre-pandemic year 2019. Elaborating on this, Muhammad Uzir said the low performance in Malaysia's domestic tourism was due to expenditure by domestic tourists, which fell 68%, while excursionists dropped 36.3%. In 2021, the number of domestic trips fell 50.7% to register 72.4 million trips as compared to 147 million trips in 2020, while overnight trips dropped 67.8% to 15.5 million trips and daily trips decreased 42.4% to 56.9 million trips. In terms of expenditure, the survey said shopping made up the largest contribution from the total expenditure with a share of 50.3%, followed by food and beverage at 15.1% and automotive fuel 11.1%. Muhammad Uzir said visiting relatives and friends contributed 24.2% in 2021 compared with 32% in 2020, but was significantly lower as compared to the pre-pandemic year in 2019, which recorded 42.3%.
Thank you for staying with us. Now, as food prices are going up, South Korean office workers started going to convenience stores for lunch. Dubbed lunchflation, the price of South Korea's lunch meals jumped 12.2%, according to Korea Consumer Agency data. Offering cheap instant noodles, sandwiches and meal boxes for under 20 ringgit, convenience stores in South Korea are now gaining in popularity as salaried workers seek ways to cut costs.
One such customer is Park Mi-won, an office worker who had never bought her lunch from a convenience store until her favorite lunch increased by more than 10% recently, spurred by inflation in South Korea, which has soared to a 14-year high.
원래 다니던 식당이 있었는데요. 가격이 너무 올라서 요즘에 편의점에 와 보니까 가격도 적당하고 맛도 좋고 그래서 일석이조가 돼서 여기는 일주일에 한 두세 번 정도 요즘에는.
According to the United Nations, global food prices surged 23% last month from last year. The war in Ukraine has impacted supplies of grains from there and Russia and caused energy and fertilizer prices to soar. One convenience shop in South Korea posted more than 30% increase in sales of instant meals in January to May versus a year ago, prompting the launch of a new meal subscription service for office workers. The increase came as the prices of restaurant dishes in South Korea rose 7.4% last month compared with a year ago, the fastest pace in 24 years, according to government statistics.
이게 사실 더 올려야 되는데 뭐 주위에 이용하시는 뭐 고객분들, 직장인분들도 주머니도 생각해야 되기 때문에 뭐 일부는 제가 제 마진에서 뭐 좀 감수를 하면서 고통 분담한다는 차원에서 뭐 조금 덜.
While many small restaurants are still benefiting from a bounce back in evening dining after months of COVID-induced social distancing rules, economists warn prolonged pressure on consumer prices will weigh on consumption and people will continue to find ways to reallocate their resources.
On to our last story of the night. Argentinian truck drivers block highways on Tuesday, June 28th. Protesting shortages and rising prices for diesel fuel amid surging inflation. The national protest, which started last week, will continue for an unspecified amount of time, as announced by the truck driver unions.
Drone footage showed lines of trucks blocking the entrance road to the city of Buenos Aires. Secretary General of the Automotive Tramways Union, Adolfo Varja, said rising prices and inflation had placed truckers on the verge of choosing between fighting or starving. Varja called on Argentine President Alberto Fernandez to step in and take control of the situation before people started losing their jobs.
Nosotros le pedimos al gobierno que nos atienda, que queremos charlar. Yo no sé si tienen todas las soluciones, pero no va a haber nunca una solución si no hay una charla.
This month, the government raised the required biodiesel content in diesel blends, hoping that it could help alleviate shortages of industrial motor fuel. According to the National Freight Transport Union FADIEC, fuel shortages affected the country in 21 of 23 provinces. Senior government officials laid the blame for the shortages on growing demand as the economy recovers from a pandemic-led slowdown. Domestic demand for diesel jumped 14% year-on-year in the first quarter, according to government data. Protests have been ongoing for 6 days, just as the country's crucial grain harvest requires transport.
Now on Sejahtera Asia tomorrow, host Juzak and Alexen will be joined by 3 special guests, which include guitarist Alif Putra and Larissa Ping, on the topic I Want to Break Free, a Queen tribute concert. And for those intending to start a business, don't miss the session with youth entrepreneur Raden Khairul Zaman on the topic Youth Entrepreneur Setup 2022. Only on Sejahtera Asia, 7:30 a.m. on TVS Astro Channel 122 and My Freeview. See the world closer with TVS as we bring you the latest news updates both locally and internationally just a click away by heading on to our website at www.tvstv.my or follow us on our social media platforms. And before we end the Nightline, I would like to leave you with the announcement of the Hari Raya Aidiladha for 2022 by Tuan Haji Muhammad Asral Jusman. Good night and thank you for watching.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bagi menyempurnakan titah perintah Seri Paduka Baginda Yang di-Pertuan Agong setelah diperkenankan oleh Duli-Duli Yang Maha Mulia Raja-Raja, maka saya bagi pihak penyimpan Moho Besar Raja-Raja Malaysia dengan ini mengisytiharkan bahawa 1 Zulhijjah 1443 Hijrah ialah pada hari Jumaat 1 hari bulan Julai 2022 Masihi. Oleh yang demikian, Hari Raya Kurban 10 Zulhijjah bagi negeri-negeri seluruh Malaysia ialah pada hari Ahad 10 hari bulan Julai 2022 Masihi. Sekian, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.